Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to talk about some lures, do some lure tests, mainly on jigs and crawfish. They're a tried and true way to catch big summer bass that are held up in the weeds and in areas of cover that provide shade. And when they're not wanting to come out, a jig's a good way to drag them out. So let me clean up my aquarium for testing today so I don't poke holes in the pool, and get my rig set up, and we'll do a couple of lure tests. I might add that I'm not a professional by any means. I've been fishing for a long time, mainly off the bank or in kayaks, a few times on boats, but I just use what I've learned and use what I got to try to help everybody else out. So, not a professional, but here's some of the stuff that I like to do. Oh boy. That's a little bit better. Alright, so I think I've got everything ready. I didn't fill it all the way up because I've got it on kind of a rickety platform, so I think that's just enough. I simulated a little bit of structure, a little bit of mud, threw a stick in there, a little tree branch, just to see the lures have a little bit of action on some structure instead of just throwing something on a blank pallet. So I've got to let this muddy water die down just a little for clarity, and we'll try some lures out. These are some of the lures we're going to be testing out today. I know I said mainly jigs, and these don't look like these over here, but for a beginner, just to give a breakdown on a jig, the hook part has a lead head on it with a brush guard concealing the hook. A skirt made up of mainly plastic or rubber in a lot of different shapes, colors, fashions, sizes, lengths, etc. And you can usually put a trailer on it. Doesn't have to be a crawfish. It can be a swim jig. In this instance, I'm going to be focusing on crawfish, and that's why I have these two guys over here, just to show you what they can do in structure, around cover, because bass go crazy for crawfish. So I don't want to get too deep into product placement, so I'm not going to say what every single trailer brand is, the type, the funny names they all have, unless somebody decides to sponsor me. That'd be really cool, but for the most part I'm going to be showing this off. Got my top-down camera going here, and then I'll do a side view. As you can see, that lure working itself around like that. You see how that skirt spreads out. Hopefully you can see with the reflection of the clouds here. That skirt spreads out. The trailer on the end pokes up. It does its thing. It'll climb over stuff. It'll dig around. It'll actually mix up the mud and the dirt, create a little ruckus down there, because that's what a crawfish does. It sits in there and digs around into corners and crevices. It can wade in little crevices and poke its body up. And the cool thing about this trailer, and I obviously need to cut my trailer down a little. I'm kind of nervous to do that because I like how it sprawls out like that. If you can see what that's doing there. I know the clarity's a little funny, but that trailer will stick up and simulate a crawfish picking at bait that flies by. And just a few subtle little twitches on this thing. Now, there's some sunshine that'll help out a little bit. A few little subtle twitches make those claws move around. It makes the glitter in that soft plastic kind of just shine a little and give off a really attractive profile. Next, we'll go to the side profile and get a much better look at what we got going on with this jig here. As I mentioned earlier, you can see that skirt just sprawls everywhere, reaching out, floating up a little. Some of the less dense plastic on the skirt kind of hangs out. Those little subtle twitches there, see, everything's just moving, it's alive. And when you swim this thing, you can keep it still and just kind of work it. Or you can let it travel along structure. creeping it up and over rocks. See how it just smoothly cascades over everything. Moving it around, stopping it, twitching it. Some of them can be swam through the water and over structure, and that tends to work too. But definitely when you're working these kind of lures, you want them to bump into things. You want them to strike the rocks, hammer into them, make some noise, get down into the corners like that. See that profile, how those claws are just sticking up like that? If I move it around, kind of does the same. Let's bring it back to that position. Just hanging out. Also digging around in the mud. That helps out a lot too, bouncing over sticks. And then if we bring this thing through the cover a little bit here, looks quite nice too. I'm muddying up the water, but this is a really good one. The trailers can be changed out to something less aggressive. As you can see, it's kind of getting caught up in my line here a little, but that's okay. I really like this one a lot. It's one of my favorite jigs to use. Now in some cases when the water clarity is really murky, you might want to darken the color up. Most of the time you want to match what your with what your bass are feeding on. You want the color to be similar, and sometimes it's just so dark, a darker lure will be a little bit more appealing to them. They'll be able to see it. It'll have a different profile. Still got a little bit of flake in this jig to put off a bit of a shine. This is that football headed jig, which is mainly good for bouncing around rocks, but it'll handle any other situation really well. Slightly different trailer here, lower profile than the other one, a little bit more aggressive claw shape, and the little ridges you see on the end of those claws help with that paddling, picking motion I mentioned earlier. Now the same thing's going on here with that last jig. The skirt's sprawling out. The trailer is kind of sitting a little lower than the other one, kind of even with what you're doing, but as we work it around, let's get a little bit more flap action. It sits up okay. It's a little bit of a lazy jig here. Sorry about the wind and the train, but the main point here is the action of this jig. Getting it around cover, getting it in the mud, bouncing it up over structure, and letting it sit. And I'm glad I'm doing this. There's a lot more information and technique when you can see what the lure's actually doing. A lot of the time we don't get to see what these things do underwater if we're in really muddy water like we are here in Texas. So hopefully by showing you this, you can kind of understand the dynamics of what this lure is going to do. In fact, I think I might have to change this trailer out, because it's more of a swim trailer actually. If I swim it along, it does a better job at doing what it needs to do right here. And you can hear that football head jig crashing into the bottom here. When it does that, when it hits rocks or it hits sticks, that sound, that vibration is going to travel and get a fish's attention. I know this isn't a jig, and I know I said I wasn't going to try to do too much product placement here, but in my experience, next to the real thing, Live Target does an amazing job at simulating a crawfish. I mean, look at this thing. It's half plastic, half hard plastic, half soft plastic. So we still get all that action. We still have a strong base to bounce around on the bottom of the water. It's even got a bit of a weight system in here. You tie off to its tail, and it's actually going to clack a little as it swims, and that'll simulate when a crawfish takes off, when it gets spooked or it swims away, it actually swims backwards, and it kicks its tail to propel it forward. So I'm going to rig this one up and drop it in, and this will hopefully show you exactly what a crawfish does, as close to one as we can get. Now this lure is definitely a little bit more expensive, but for what it's worth, I haven't caught anything on this one specifically. Back in the day, I bought some in some different colors because I was fishing in East Texas as opposed to West Texas now. And this is a close match to what we got going on in my neck of the woods. So let's just drop this guy in and see how he does. Immediately upon dropping this guy in, he's going to float down in such a manner it really mimics how a crawfish just kind of sinks to the bottom. As you can see on the fall, it stays horizontal for the most part. I'm going to be kicking up a lot of mud doing this, but it comes over quite well if it's perched up on this rock. Its claws are pretty close to where I would kind of like them. A few little twitches. You can see the action of this lure go. Now I can't do a really good job of the retrieve here because on a rod or a reel, or a good reel, it's going to pull it in such a manner where it swims a little bit better than me just pulling it with my hand. But you can see how that tail is clipping around like that, clacking, if you will. I love the profile of this thing. I like how it sits, scuttles around like it needs to, occasionally falling over in a weird manner, but sometimes something slightly different happens with lures. If it falls over on its side, a bass can be more inclined to strike it because maybe it's simulating that it's kind of wounded. It's not swimming the normal way it does. It's falling over a certain way. But I mean, this thing digs around, if I'm fortunate enough, underwater in the lake to get it to land over some cover like this and poke up, twitch it around a little. You can see how it really takes off and does what it's supposed to do. There it is, falling over a little bit. See if I can get it to just kind of stick down in the corner. That's kind of what I wanted right there. Now this is a little bit fancier, a little bit more expensive. It does some of the same things. It's from Yozuri, but it's a little bit more. Let's see if I can hold it up to the light. You can see through it a little bit more, which adds to the realism of it. Still tying off to the tail. It's got a little bit of a rudder on the bottom of the tail. It clacks, it rattles. It's got weight in it. The eyes are a little bit more attractive. Underwater, they should glow pretty good. Different hook setup than like the last one we showed. It was over the top and it had a weed guard. I forgot to mention that. This one utilizes the antenna anatomy of the crawfish and has a slight weed guard on it to keep that hook true. Otherwise, obviously, it would be falling down and get hung up on a lot of different things. Now, I haven't fished this one personally yet. I'm a little nervous too because it was kind of pricey, but I do like the profile of it. I like the idea behind it. The arms are a little longer, so when it sits up, it should pick a little different. Now, this one kind of sat in the sun, so it warped a little, but we'll tie it off and throw it in the aquarium and see how it does, see if it's really worth it. So this one does fall in the same way the other one does, horizontal, nice and steady. As I mentioned, one of those claws is a little warped, so it's going to kind of throw everything off. And just as I predicted, though, if you can see those eyes, and the light hits them just right, that puts off a nice glow. And it swims really well. It hangs a little lower when it swims than the other one. Moving over structure. Now it sits kind of flat. It's not really weighted like the other one, where it's going to sit up a little higher. It just kind of lays there flat. You really have to get it over some cover to make those claws do what you want them to do. I'll throw this one a couple of times at the lake this weekend to see if I can really catch anything on it. Try to see if I can't get that claw to relax. This is kind of getting in the way. Nice little shine on the top. Well, that's really good. I know that one claw's warped, but sit it up on some structure or rock and it seems to hold its profile. Let me see if I can't get it rested on there just right again. That's not too shabby. And you can see how that hook, even if I get it over here close, I know it's getting a little murky in here, but if I get it close to some brush or weeds, that thing's just almost getting caught up in there, but not quite. You probably will a little bit. Not too bad though. There are a lot of different trailers that you can put on the end of these jigs. Different profile, sizes, colors, shapes. I mean, there is so much stuff out there. Now I have, my personal favorite is this one. The claws look like they're picking a little bit more as it's sitting on the bottom. It has that ridge on the claw that helps it flap around. It's a decent profile, good body. Comes pre-lined where the hook can be rigged weedless. I like this one too because sometimes I can take out these sections here, lower the profile of it if I need to. And sometimes you have some, that this was on that other jig, that have a little bit more of an appendage on them. Bigger, longer antennas, more aggressive claws. This one over here is really crazy with that really long antenna on it that'll flap around. This is another one of my favorites because this is a good trailer. It does everything you want it to do, claws, antennas, everything. But this one in particular is hollow. Squishes down. You can kind of see through it there a little bit. When this hits the bottom and turns up as it's supposed to, little bubbles are going to come out of there. And when those little bubbles come out, that simulates something that's alive and breathing down there. So this one's really good to have. A little tube craw. I don't really use this one much. I got it in my monthly bass fishing lure subscription box, but it's nice that I have an extreme of colors and then a really bright white, because there is a little bit of clear water at the lake that I fish at, and most of them come equipped to be altered. So this one in particular, the claws are stuck together. You could leave it like that and it would flap really good, or you can just rip it and now it flaps even crazier. I do like how it has these ribs down here on the bottom. That'll put off a little bit of vibration. That'll help when it's on the bottom, making the mud boil up a little bit. So not bad. I have a ton of different things, an extra, it looks like I even have an extra head to that one crawfish lure. There's a closer look at how that piece comes off. They always give you an extra one when you buy that lure specifically. Randomly I have these bugs in here. Creature baits are something else too, and I might do a video on some creature baits because those are fun too, and they kind of go hand in hand with jigs, or you know, throwing them on the end of the trail, throwing them by, you could throw all of these by themselves without a weight or anything and just let them do their thing. Texas rig them, all kinds of different things. I have some non-skirted jig heads in here. Here's another football headed jig, just set into there, and that's on that long, one of those long flappy ones. rigged up. This guy will teeter around a whole lot more, swim a little faster. There's a ton of different kinds of jig heads that you can use too. That'll do different things. Since this one's nice and flat, hopefully this one will sit down and reach up and give that profile that we like. This one's pretty close to the same thing, just a little bit heavier of a jig head on it. Still really flappy and cool. I save my little pieces when I do cut them off, because you never know when you might need something to cap off a hook. I'll even have a little fish head hiding in here. That's for a swim bait video I'll do later. These are really cool. A little teaser for the swim baits. Now I'll drop a few of these in here just to show you how they rock in that aquarium and how they swim around. I won't go into too much detail with them. I didn't mention these little guys. A smaller profile could get you a better bite, but maybe not a bigger fish. I like how these are ribbed if you look really close. That's really nice. I'm seeing a lot of soft plastics out there that have a ball end on their appendages like this. I know that sounds weird, but that puts off a little bit more action underwater, a little bit more of something for the water to kind of push around and give off a better profile. And sometimes when you're slimming it down even more, a very simple, see there's no antennas here, there's no weird appendages, claw-like on the end here, still will put off a good action. This could be used for those jigs with the skirts or without, or this could even make a really good trailer for a spinner bait if you wanted. I mean, these would too, but this one's perfect for that in my opinion. The lighting isn't quite ideal here, but there's a blue sheen that I really like on this one. When it's underwater, you can see it a lot better in a natural color. I believe that's pumpkin seed. Now, a lot of the times with all these colors, you'll notice I have a lot more than I do of the other one of this kind of color. Oops, this watermelon, pumpkin seed, Mardi Gras. I believe this one is this one's color's Mardi Gras. You can see the different flake pattern in there. Sometimes the more camouflage something is, like this one here, sometimes the more camouflage something is, the more likely it is to be struck, for the simple fact that most fish or what they're eating in the lake doesn't want to be caught. It doesn't want to be hunted or eaten. So it's going to naturally camouflage itself a little bit. If you see some kind of white thing in the water, a fish that's bright white or silver, or even some rare cases of albinoism in some things, those guys are usually the first to get got. Mainly in clear water, not as much probably in murky water, but that's another little thing that can help catch some big bass. I'm not going to put every single soft plastic I have on some jig heads and show them off, but I will do a few just so you can see what a jig without a skirt can do. The water's still a little murky and it's a bit overcast, so hopefully this shows up pretty well. Well, this one, you can do the same things. Bounce it over. It's still going to do what it needs to do. As you can see it profiling up like that, that shape of that jig head is really helping with that. Slowly fluttering down. Maybe simulating a wounded crawfish here. And you can see those antennae, since they have that curve to them, when this thing swims, it just flaps around like crazy. But with a solid jig head, still able to crawl around, get into crevices, dig up a little bit of mud, a little bit more subtle profile. If your skirt seems to be throwing off the fish, maybe scaring them away, and you need something a little bit more subtle, drop down to something a little bit more simple. Just the plastic on the end like this. And there it is, the perfect land. Those claws come up, pick up at the air a little, or pick up at the water a little bit, simulating that crawfish reaching out and grabbing little particulates and things in the water, like that strange thing floating up. I've created kind of a neat ecosystem in here. But yeah, we'll move on to a different soft plastic and see how that one goes to the water. But I really like this one. Does a lot of good things. Here I've got that tube craw jigged up. I don't want to drop it in right away because I want you to see what I was talking about with that being hollow. See if I can get it on here just right. See those little bubbles coming up? Bring it out, let it kind of run off. Boom. Oh, perfect. And this one swims really well too. Nice aerodynamic profile to just go right through the water. I really like this one a lot. Let's get some bubbles again, because that's the coolest part of this whole thing. Huh, must have filled it up. Shake it out a little bit. There we go. Isn't that neat? One of my favorites. So for the last little swim test lure demo here, I wanted to use the one I don't really use that much. This is going to be kind of new for me too. Right away though, the profile of this thing swims great. I've got it rigged a little differently than before. You can see I went in through that screw end part of the jig and rigged it up that way. My logic there was when it lands, it might profile a little better. And as you can see, that thing noses up, puts its claws in the air. It's actually a pretty nice profile. I'll have to try it out a little on Saturday, now that I'm seeing such good response and action from this thing. Kind of don't like how it's a little flat. I'd like it to be a little bit more round, but as it's swimming off, sorry about the wind, as it's swimming away, it actually puts off some good action. See how it does on the little obstacle course I've created. Over some rocks, down into corners, banging on some timber. Stirs up the mud a little bit, that's good. And let's see if we can try to put it into this cover a little bit. Not bad, so I'm actually glad I got these ones in that mystery monthly tackle box thing. Great profile. Great action. Floats up really well too. Not bad. One quick thing a nice tip. If your jig head isn't heavy enough and you happen to have some pin weights, you could stick a few more pin weights on the end of that lure to get it down a little quicker, get it to stand up like this. 'Cause that's ideally what you want if you're going to be sitting the jig down on the bottom. A few little twitches. Stands up every time. That's really good. Not too shabby. So that pretty much concludes my lure test video. I found out some new things that I'm going to try next time I go out with some of those things I hadn't used before. And hopefully you got informed on what your lures and jigs are actually doing on the bottom of the lake or creek or pond or wherever you're fishing. A better idea of what bass love and a few little techniques on how to fish them and where to fish them. I probably missed out on a lot of different things, but that's my take on it. Thanks for watching. Beard cam.